So this is going to be pretty low quality production as far as video goes on a cell phone, and not the best lighting from a shop perspective. But I don't see a whole lot of videos out there, especially in any sort of English, helping folks to understand how to use the Maxx, M-A-X-X, brand chain grinders. All in all, I am pretty happy with this unit, and heavily contemplated the 520 and 620 organ units when I decided on the Maxx, partially due to a price point and partially due to the unique feature, if you see right there, that you can swing the head both ways, and then you can resultantly swing the carriage both ways to always grind into the tooth the same way you would grind into square, at least from the standpoint of grinding into the tooth. Now, outside of special adapters, you're not going to do square grinding on this machine. It's purely a round grinder. But where you can flop the chain over, back and forth, and grind into the tooth rather than grind into the tooth on one side of the chain and out of the tooth on the other side of the chain, it makes a difference. Now, these Maxxes do seem to have a little looser tolerances, especially on the carriage, as compared to the organ. And there's a lot of aspects about that trying to learn how to truly use this thing and figure out the tips and tricks has been an interesting trial by fire for me of learning on the fly, because the included instructions and support videos really are a little lacking. So this is an automatic clamping unit, and that looking around the back side here, if you see this bail and spring, when you pull down on the grinder or the grinder head, that lifts up and that tightens the carriage here and takes the play out. Now, the issue with that is there's a dial indicator here that you spin this back and forth to account for the width of your chain. For what it indicates, getting the line lined up exactly for 063, 058, or 050, which are vast majority of chain chassis that everybody's running, you honestly want to index it to just a tick looser than indicated, because if you indicate it where it wants to be indicated and pull down the head, it's prematurely stretched or stretching that spring for no reason, but B, and more importantly, the play here, you see how hard this is to feed through. It doesn't feed through real well. So what I've taken to doing is running it just a little less than what it indicates. I'll get back here to the tooth I want to start on, where the chain chassis is already marked for easy visual reference. But like I say, I will start just a little looser and kind of play with it, run it back and forth to where it just is getting a little bit snug. And then pulling down of the head will take up the rest. Unfortunately, I really need another hand here. We'll see if I can juggle the phone. I can pull on this chain and it's not moving. So that's one thing I've learned. Secondarily, because you can run this carriage both ways, you can run this indexing pawl in and out this way. And depending on the size of the chain, you definitely want to do that, because you may end up taking off part of the pawl, as you see I did here inadvertently. Luckily, those are available and they're pretty inexpensive, and what little I lost really isn't affecting things in the grand scheme of things, but it's something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, because you're sharpening you're swapping everything over, the head tilt angle, the carriage tilt angle, everything, to sharpen into the tooth both ways. If you want a 10-degree up angle, you're going to put it on 10 outwards and run it that way the whole time, because you're swapping the chain around and filing into the tooth. That is going to be the same distance away from the cutter, and setting up the geometry for a slightly upward cut. Now, whether it's actual 10 degrees or not, I haven't measured it, and honestly, I'm not terribly concerned the way my chains are cutting. I'm pretty ecstatic. But Where that would come into play and you would go the other direction would be if you were going to run everything one side and grind like a traditional grinder. That is where you would be moving that back and forth to accommodate for that. In this case, it's not. So, like I say, I'll generally run it at 10 degrees to get that upward angle and make the chain self-feed properly. I've noticed with some semi-chisel chains, you really do actually want to run it at 0 because they just don't seem to cut the best. Some of them running that 10-degree up angle, but some do, and it's kind of a trial and error thing. Beyond that, like I say, I'm pretty happy with the unit. I've had this unit, probably 5 or 6 years now. The light that's in here, you probably can't see it very well, but there is a light in there to help illuminate the grinding process, and it just died. They make replacements that are some proprietary bulb, and they're not terribly expensive. I'm gonna buy 4 or 5 of them off of Bailey's when I get a chance, but I'm gonna have to figure out how to take this unit apart to access the light, because the spindle for the wheel actually runs in front of the light. So the light is physically located above the spindle coming off the motor. So I've got to figure out how to finagle that out, if this part comes off the bottom or if the control box comes off the top, or exactly how you do this. Some of them I am going to have an additional learning process there. Like I say, beyond that, this has been a tremendous grinder. I've done 1/4-inch pitch chain all the way up through 404 for all the stuff that tend to cut here in Kansas, which is a cornucopia of things, but most often I would say 50 to 70% of my cutting is hedge, and the rest varies in hardness from honey locust or various oaks or red elm or hackberry, all the way down to the occasional cottonwood that I have to help remove for somebody on a friendship basis. Generally I won't cut that intentionally. Like I say, all in all, fantastic unit. Just a little bit of finagling and learning curve with it. The depth stop works just the same as any other grinder, but I have noticed there's just a little more flex in the head when you hit that stop. You can actually flex the unit a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. So you really want to back it off and then work into it incrementally and slowly and test it. So right now, this is just sliding in. I would still have to obviously index this chain just a hair, which I will do. And I mean small adjustments when you're getting in the ballpark. Because I just want that wheel to rub on the tooth a little bit when it goes in. You may not be able to hear that, but it's just rubbing right there. So now I'll give it about another 1/4 of a turn, and that'll be where I want to be to get a good grind, and if I need to go more, I can. One thing I will say is I've tried the salmon wheels and that came with this, and I've tried some of the other wheels, but I picked up a pair of the Diamond Wheel Incorporated sharpening wheels, the cubic boron nitride wheels, CBN, and they work tremendously. I have done a load of chains on each wheel, because I have the smaller sized wheel for 325, 3/8 low pro and 1/4 pitch chain, and the larger wheel for 3/8 and 404. In fact, I'll grab the larger wheel. It's a little bit dusty from hanging in this barn, but that wheel has probably done 200 or 300 chains, and there's no discernible wear or difference from brand new. It still sharpens tremendously. I will probably buy a couple more just to have them on hand, and figuring inflation's not going to get a hell of a lot better with time, just to have them on hand and have them available. But like I say, the wheels cut very well. The wheel absorbs more of the heat than the vitreous wheels do, so it's easier to sharpen the tooth without bluing the cutter and overheating it. These cleaning blocks are absolutely key and critical. Running that on the wheel occasionally to clean that up and expose some of the new CBN surface, so that's going to cut and run correctly. But I don't have to do it very often. one of the biggest things is getting the chains clean, which, as you can see, there's still some gunk on this chain. I'm not going to go quite to the effort of putting a degreaser on it and cleaning all the stuff out, because it's just going to go right back into cutting hedge and get pitched up. But I do take a wire wheel on that bench grinder, which chops a mess, but it is what it is. But that wire wheel does a pretty good job of taking all the stuff off of the cutter to help the wheel stay more clean in the process, in the grinding process, and not load the wheel up with pitch and gunk. And as long as you do those steps, all in all, this is a hell of a unit. I may actually buy a second one, because taking the cover off to switch back and forth isn't a huge pain by any means, but it's still one more thing. So to have one set up for 3/8 and 4/4 and one set up for the rest of the chains I normally grind would be handy. The one thing I will say that the literature does not do a good job at all of explaining for the Maxx is this thinner wheel from Diamond Wheel that you can buy direct from Diamond Wheel, less expensively than you can buy it from Bailey's. Not a knock against Bailey's, I've done a lot of business with them, but you can get it cheaper straight from Diamond Wheel Incorporated. But this thinner wheel, I don't remember the spec or the model number. I could take it off and look at it, but I just don't want to right now. The one thing on this Maxx that I encountered is the wheel, or the inner wheel material, is just thin enough that the arbor clamp, in fact, I will go ahead and take the cover off. Bear with me a second as I do this. The cover, or the arbor rather, is just a little thicker than the wheel is. The 3/8 and 4/4 wheel does not have this problem, but the wheel for quarter pitch, 3/8 low pro, and 325 is just a little too narrow, so it will not chuck up properly and have the necessary friction to lock it down. So if you notice this ugly looking gasket, I don't know where I came up with it, but it's somewhere here around the farm. But this gasket takes up the difference and it locks in tight. Now obviously it's not running completely true, so it introduces just a little bit of vibration to the machine. Not enough that I've noticed any sort of problems. Probably not something you want to do truly long term for a motor, but I haven't figured out a better solution yet. I'm probably going to have a friend machine me some correct size uniform flat washers or fender washers to go on this, snug it up and actually run and have as little run out as possible to have it run true. But this has been an ad hoc solution I came up with, and it works. Like say, the larger wheel chucks right up. It's a little bit thicker material on the inside than the thinner wheel is, and it chucks up just fine, snugs right up, you can go to town. This wheel, the thinner wheel, works very well on the organs and supposedly on the Jollies and possibly Tacomas, but it does not chuck up properly on the Maxx. And having spoken with folks at Diamond Wheel and having tried to contact customer support for the Maxx grinder, which that's a whole nother saga I won't detail right now. Great folks, but there's some language barriers. But I can't seem to come up with either a better arbor or a slightly thicker wheel. So you can see here the Diamond Wheel Incorporated stamp. So with the phone number to call. So C on the serial number or model number there. C or CS for chainsaw. 575 decimal 3878 E as in echo. That's for the 3/8 and 4/4 wheels, and I have this chucked up on the wrong side to read it, but you can find them on the website readily. Like I say, fantastic wheel. After running these, I would not want to go back to running a vitreous wheel and having to keep it shaped properly and maintained, and having your grinder, grind down and have to adjust some of the tolerances that way to get the chain where you want it, especially if you're doing say a 36-inch 404 chain or 3/8, but especially 404. If you got one that really got boogered up, you got a nail or a bullet in the stump and rock the hell out of the chain, and you have to make multiple passes, you may have to reprofile in the process. There's no reprofiling for this. It is what it is, and it just flat runs. The one thing I have noticed, not with the wider wheel, but with the smaller wheel, is that when you are cutting into the tooth, the wheel will flex just a little bit. It has a little bit of sideways deflection. So you don't want to make a large cut at any point in time of the tooth. You want to kind of walk into it and kind of feel what the wheel is doing and let it cut that way, but you need to keep a very hard eye on it because it'll try to flex outwards just a little bit away from the tooth. So you take it nice and easy and it will cut true and make for a very sharp tooth. Now I think I can still hand file just a touch sharper than I've managed to learn how to do on this machine yet. But for the cutting I'm doing, I'm not trying to make a cookie cutter chain and do all that. That's great sport. I love doing it. And the guys that know how to make a fast race chain, that is a whole different art form. But for production, farm environment, sawing, this is so much faster than filing. You know, if you got a bunch of chains knock out, you know, I would make this purchase again, hands down, you know, 7 days a week and not think twice. And if it ever fails, I'll replace it. You know, I may pick up a second. I may still invest in a 620. We'll see. But, like I say, been a tremendous unit. Overall, very happy with it. Just thought I would make a quick, kind of poor quality video, but a little more audio than visual in this case. But try to help out people that have these things and are experiencing some of the same opportunities I am when it comes to learning curve and trying to get the results they're ultimately looking for. As always, safe sawing, keep chains sharp, and God bless.